Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. While we chill here in Minecraft, building, exploring, and just vibing, let me tell you a story not about creepers or ender dragons, but about something a lot harder to fight in real life: heartbreak, trust, and second chances. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story because this one hits different. My ex showed up at my wedding just to stop it. No, I'm not setting up a punchline. That's the literal, unadulterated, pure cringe truth of what happened. It wasn't a movie, it was my actual life, and for 10 agonizing minutes, it felt like I was the main character in the worst romantic comedy ever produced. A film so terrible it would be universally panned by critics and audiences alike. To understand the sheer magnitude of this nuclear-level audacity, you have to understand the prequel, The Dark Ages, the 5-year-long cautionary tale that was my relationship with her. Her name was Chloe, and our time together was less a romance and more a long-form psychological study in which I played the role of a creature with a spine made of wet noodles and she played a beautiful, captivating, soul-devouring succubus powered by male validation. I was the quintessential nice guy, a term I now understand to be a euphemism for a dude with zero boundaries and the self-esteem of a damp paper towel. My entire operational system was built on the flawed premise that if I just accommodated her enough, if I made myself small enough, if I sacrificed enough of my own identity on the altar of her happiness, she would eventually bestow upon me the holy grail of her unwavering love. It was a fool's errand, a quest with no reward, a game I was programmed to lose from the start. I was her emotional butler, her on-call therapist, her personal cheerleader for every manufactured crisis she cooked up to keep herself at the center of the universe. A bad day at her retail job. That was a 3-hour phone call where I was expected to listen, nod, and validate, while my own actual problems were relegated to the do not open file in my brain. A minor disagreement with one of her friends. That was my entire Friday night down the drain, spent dissecting the subtle nuances of a text message that read, K. I canceled plans with my actual friends, guys I'd known since childhood, with a frequency that was frankly criminal. A text from her saying, I miss you, with a sad face emoji was a thermonuclear warhead that could obliterate any pre-existing commitment I had. My friends stopped inviting me out, and I couldn't even blame them. Why invite a guy whose +1 was a remote-controlled leash held by his girlfriend? Financially, I was her personal ATM, despite my own account balance consistently hovering near zero. I'd put dinners I couldn't afford on a credit card that was already screaming for mercy, just to maintain the illusion that I was a provider, a man of means, when in reality I was a boy playing dress-up with debt. My own identity eroded until I was nothing more than a reflection of her tastes. She was into obscure indie bands whose names sounded like they were generated by a sad computer algorithm, like Whispering Bicycles or Melancholy Ferret. So I dutifully attended their concerts, standing in a crowd of people wearing beanies indoors, pretending to enjoy the sound of a man mumbling about his feelings over 3 dissonant guitar chords, all while my soul was screaming for the sweet, sweet sound of an AC/DC guitar riff. She decided she was a vegan for a 6-month period, not for any ethical reason, but because it was trendy. So I became a de facto vegan, my body starved for protein, my dreams haunted by the ghost of a perfectly cooked medium-rare ribeye. I ate so much quinoa I'm pretty sure my DNA was permanently altered. I was a character she was writing, and I was too weak to demand a rewrite. She wasn't a monster, not in the traditional sense. She was just a black hole. She didn't maliciously destroy things. She just consumed them by her very nature. And I was the star closest to her, my light, my energy, my very essence being siphoned away until I was just a cold, dim rock. The breakup, when it came, was a mercy killing I was too cowardly to perform on myself. She delivered it with the calm, detached precision of a surgeon removing a benign tumor. It was a Tuesday, the most pointless day of the week, which felt appropriate. She sat me down on the couch we'd bought together, on my credit card, naturally, and dropped the atom bomb of breakup cliches. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. The words hung in the air, a toxic cloud of finality. Then came the follow-up strike, the I need to go find myself missile. It was a lie, of course. She wasn't trying to find herself. She was just bored with me. I had become a solved puzzle, a completed video game. She had extracted every last drop of validation and control from our dynamic, and there was nothing left for her to conquer. The loyal, predictable puppy is comforting for a while, but it's never as exciting as a wild wolf, and she was ready to go run with the wolves. She probably figured she could just stick me in storage, a reliable backup plan to be dusted off if her adventures in the wild didn't pan out. The 6 months that followed were a gray, featureless void. I wasn't living, I was just occupying space. My apartment became a monument to male despair, a biohazard zone littered with pizza boxes and empty bottles of cheap whiskey. I subsisted on a diet of microwave burritos and self-pity. I was a husk, a shell, a ghost haunting the ruins of a life I hadn't even realized wasn't my own. The turning point wasn't a single moment of clarity, but a slow, creeping disgust. It started one morning when I caught my reflection in the darkened screen of my TV. I saw a pale, puffy-faced creature with dead eyes and the posture of a question mark. My hair was a greasy mess. My t-shirt was stained with the ghosts of forgotten meals. And in that moment, I didn't feel sadness. I felt a volcanic, cleansing rage. But the rage wasn't for her. It was for me, for the man I had allowed myself to become. The simp, the doormat, the background character in his own story. And I made a decision. That guy, the one in the reflection, had to die. Not literally, but metaphorically. He needed to be ceremonially executed, and a new man needed to be built from his ashes. This wasn't a revenge plot. It wasn't about showing her what she was missing. It was about showing myself what I was missing. It was about reclaiming my own goddamn soul. The first step was therapy. Actually talking to a professional who, for the first time, held up a mirror and forced me to look at my own patterns of behavior. I learned about boundaries, which to me was a concept as foreign as quantum physics. I learned that no is a complete sentence. I learned that my worth wasn't determined by how useful I was to other people. It was like a software update for my brain, patching years of buggy, self-destructive code. The next step was physical. I dragged my pathetic, soft body to a gym. The first session was a masterclass in humiliation. I could barely bench the empty bar. My push-ups looked like a dying fish flopping on a dock. But I kept going back. The pain in my muscles was a welcome distraction from the pain in my soul. And slowly, painfully, things started to change. The weakness turned to soreness, and the soreness turned to strength. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where the only person I had to please was the man I was yesterday. I reconnected with my friends. It was awkward at first. I had to swallow my pride and apologize for being a terrible, absentee friend. To their eternal credit, they took me back, slagged me off mercilessly for a few weeks, and then it was like I had never left. Having a real support system, a tribe, was like breathing fresh air after years in a stuffy, windowless room. I focused on my career, something I had let stagnate while I was busy managing Chloe's endless emotional portfolio. I took on new projects, learned new skills, and started climbing the ladder. The confidence I was building in the gym and in therapy started to bleed over into my professional life. I wasn't just faking it till I made it. I was actually becoming competent, reliable, and respected. 2 years flew by in a montage of self-improvement. I was a new man, forged in the fires of heartbreak and rebuilt with the steel of self-respect. And that's when I met Emily. It wasn't a thunderbolt moment. It was quiet and easy and real. We met through a mutual friend at a casual barbecue. There was no drama, no games. We just talked and laughed, and it felt natural. Emily was everything Chloe wasn't. She was independent, with her own career, her own passions, her own fully formed personality. She didn't need me to complete her. She was already whole. Our relationship was a partnership, a team of two equals. We supported each other, but we also challenged each other. We could have a disagreement without it escalating into a 4-day Cold War. She loved that I had my own friends and my own hobbies, and she actively encouraged me to pursue them. She was the calm, steady lighthouse to Chloe's chaotic, destructive hurricane. When I proposed to her on a quiet hiking trail, with no audience but the trees, it was the most certain I had ever felt about anything. Her yes wasn't a victory. It was a homecoming. Of course, this much peace and happiness could not go unnoticed by the forces of chaos. The moment we posted our engagement pictures on social media, the bat signal went up in whatever dark corner of the world Chloe was currently inhabiting. The first DM was innocuous. "Congrats." I replied with a simple, emotionless thanks. I thought, foolishly, that this was a sign of maturity, a final closing of the chapter. But I was wrong. It was the first tremor before the earthquake. The late-night texts began a week later. Long, rambling essays about our unbreakable connection. She sent old photos of us, captioned with "Remember how happy we were." She was trying to gaslight me into believing that our toxic, one-sided relationship had been some kind of epic romance. She was a historical revisionist, painting herself as the tragic heroine and me as the fool who had let his soulmate go. I showed every single message to Emily. Total transparency. This was a lesson the old me had never learned. Emily wasn't threatened or jealous. She was just annoyed. "Wow," she said, reading one of Chloe's dramatic monologues. "She really thinks she's the main character in everyone's story, doesn't she?" My reply to Chloe was a brick wall of a text. "I am very happy with Emily and we are getting married. I need you to stop contacting me and respect my relationship." For a normal person, this would have been the end. But for Chloe, it was merely a plot twist, a challenge to be overcome. The communication just shifted. I blocked her number, so she started emailing. Her emails were even more unhinged, full of philosophical nonsense about fate and destiny. I blocked her email address. She made a new one. I blocked that one too. She tried to use mutual acquaintances as carrier pigeons, but my new, improved social circle had a zero-tolerance policy for drama. They shut her down cold. I started to feel like the protagonist in a low-budget horror movie, haunted by a ghost who just wouldn't stay dead. We hired a wedding planner and made a conscious effort to keep the details off social media, but in a world of interconnected friends of friends, some information was bound to leak. I had a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, a low-level anxiety that she was going to pull some kind of stunt. But I pushed it down. I told myself I was being paranoid. She wouldn't. She couldn't. It was just too insane. Famous last words. The wedding day arrived, and it was perfect. The venue was a beautiful, rustic barn set in rolling hills. The sun was shining. Everything was running on schedule. I stood at the altar, watching my groomsmen fidget with their ties, my heart thumping a steady, happy rhythm against my ribs. Then the music changed, and Emily appeared at the end of the aisle. And bro, it was like the whole world went into slow motion. She was radiant, a vision of calm and beauty, and the smile she gave me was a promise, a secret language that only we understood. All the anxiety, all the stress, all the lingering ghosts of my past just evaporated. In that moment, there was only her. She reached the altar, took my hands, and we turned to face the officiant. He began the ceremony, his voice a warm, comforting drone. I was barely listening to the words. I was just lost in Emily's eyes. We exchanged our vows, our voices steady, our promises real and heartfelt. Then came the moment, the final hurdle, the line that has launched 1,000 cinematic dramas. The officiant smiled warmly. "If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be lawfully joined in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The traditional, polite silence descended. It's a moment of theater, a formality. No one ever speaks. Except this time someone did. "I do." The voice cut through the silence like a shard of glass. It was firm, clear, and sickeningly familiar. Came from the back. A collective, audible gasp swept through our 150 guests. It was a sound I will never forget. Every single person turned around in a synchronized wave of shock. I turned too, my blood turning to ice water in my veins. And there she was, Chloe. She stood at the entrance to the aisle, a specter at the feast. She was wearing a skin-tight red dress, a color so loud and aggressive it was an act of war. She looked magnificent and utterly insane, her face a mask of tragic, self-important resolve. She had cast herself as the heroine in this drama, the one who would bravely speak her truth, consequences be damned. The world tilted on its axis. My brain was a mess of error messages. How did she get here? How did she know? This can't be real. My immediate instinct, a ghost of my former self, was shame, embarrassment, a desperate need to apologize for this circus. Then Emily squeezed my hand. It wasn't a gentle, reassuring squeeze. It was a hard, grounding, get your shit together squeeze. I looked at her. Her face was pale, but her eyes were on fire. There was no fear, no sadness. Only a righteous, tectonic fury. She wasn't looking at Chloe. She was looking at me, and her expression said, "Handle this." That look was the defibrillator my frozen heart needed. It shocked me back to life. This wasn't my shame to carry. This was her mess, her insanity, and this was my wedding to defend. The old me died for good in that instant. Chloe began her slow, dramatic walk down the aisle, a predator closing in. Her eyes were locked on me. "You can't do this. My name," she said, her voice trembling with expertly feigned emotion. "What we had was real. You know it was. Don't throw it all away for this." She gestured vaguely at Emily, at the altar, at my entire future, as if it were a cheap trinket I had foolishly picked up at a flea market. She made it halfway down the aisle before I raised my hand, palm out, a universal symbol for stop. "Chloe," I said. My voice didn't shake. It was a cold, hard, solid thing. It echoed slightly in the suddenly silent barn. "Stop right there." She actually faltered, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. This wasn't following her script. I was supposed to be conflicted, torn, maybe even secretly relieved. I was not supposed to be defiant. "You don't get to do this," I said, each word a carefully aimed bullet. "You don't get to burn my life to the ground and then come back to complain about the ashes. You had your chance. You made your choice. The story of you and me is over. It's been over for years. You are reading from a book that has already been thrown in the fire." I never let go of Emily's hand. I was drawing strength from her, a silent circuit of power between us. I turned my head to look at Emily, and I gave her a small, confident nod. She nodded back, her eyes saying, "Finish him." I turned back to the intruder. "I think you're confused, Chloe. You seem to think you're the hero of this story. But you're not. You're the villain. Or maybe just the comic relief. I haven't decided yet." A few shocked laughs rippled through the guests. The tension was starting to break, replaced by a sense of surreal, second-hand embarrassment for her. Her tragic mask began to crumble, revealing the raw panic underneath. "But I love you," she cried out, her voice cracking. It was her last resort, the final, desperate pull of a slot machine that would never pay out. "No, you don't," I replied instantly, the truth of it absolute and liberating. "You don't love me. You love the idea of me. You love the control you had over me. You love the validation I gave you. You are not in love. You are just in withdrawal." "Love," I said, turning to Emily and looking her straight in the eye. "Is this? It's peace. It's respect. It's partnership. It's showing up for each other every single day, not just showing up at a wedding to feed your own ego. You are a tourist here, Chloe, and visiting hours are over." I turned my back on her then, a complete and total dismissal. I faced my bride, my partner, my future. The world narrowed until it was just her face. Behind me, I heard a quiet commotion. My best man, Dave, who was built like a small truck, and Emily's brother, an actual rugby player, had materialized on either side of Chloe. They didn't touch her. They just stood there, two human mountains, their presence a polite but non-negotiable eviction notice. "I think you've overstayed your welcome," Dave said, his voice a calm, deep rumble that carried no malice but infinite finality. Chloe's final, desperate wails of "you're making a mistake, and you'll regret this," were pathetic, hollow echoes as they calmly, inexorably, escorted her back up the aisle and out of our lives for good. The heavy wooden doors of the barn closed behind them with a soft, satisfying thud. Silence. A stunned, electric silence. I took a deep breath, the first one that felt like it had reached my lungs in 10 minutes. I looked at Emily and gave her a shaky grin. "Well," I said, "that was unexpected." She just laughed, a beautiful, cathartic sound that broke the spell. I turned to the officiant, who looked like he needed a stiff drink and possibly a new career. "Shall we?" I asked. The whole room just erupted. It wasn't just laughter. It was cheering, applause, a standing ovation. They weren't just cheering for us to get married. They were cheering because they had all just witnessed a demon being exorcised in real time. The officiant, a legend in his own right, just straightened his tie, beamed at us and said, "As I was saying, when he finally pronounced us husband and wife, the kiss wasn't just a kiss. It was a seal, a victory, the final page of a long and difficult chapter, and the beautiful, clean, first page of a new one. Chloe didn't ruin our wedding. She made it legendary. She gave us the ultimate proof that what we have is unbreakable. She showed up to stop a wedding and instead gave me the opportunity to publicly declare my undying love and loyalty to my wife, while simultaneously banishing the last ghost of my pathetic past. It was the best, most unintentional wedding gift I could have ever asked for. If you believe in standing up for your own happiness, obliterate that like button. Subscribe for more stories about finally getting to the happily ever after. She said I'd never make it, not in a mean way, not with a dramatic flourish, but with the calm, soul-crushing certainty of an accountant telling you that you can't afford to buy a house. It was a statement of fact to her, a simple calculation where my ambition was the variable and the result was always inevitably failure. Her name was Isabella, and for 3 years, she was the beautiful, pragmatic, and utterly dream-killing center of my universe. We met in college, a classic story. I was the scruffy, bright-eyed idealist with a head full of dreams and a wallet full of moths. I was going to be a video game developer. Not just any developer, mind you, but an auteur, an indie darling who would craft intricate, meaningful experiences that would make people weep into their keyboards. I was fueled by a dangerous cocktail of youthful arrogance, caffeine, and a genuine, burning passion for my craft. Isabella was different. She was studying business, a path as straight and predictable as a Roman road. She had a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and probably a 50-year plan that included details about her retirement portfolio. She was organized, logical, and had a personality that was as stable and unexciting as a well-managed index fund. Opposites attract, or so the cliché goes. In reality, I think she was attracted to my potential as a fixer-upper project, and I was attracted to her stability, a grounding force in my chaotic, creative life. Our life together was a study in contrasts. Our apartment was a tiny, one-bedroom box that always smelled of my stale coffee and her lavender-scented laundry detergent. My half of the space was a chaotic explosion of tech. A hulking PC I'd built myself, 2 monitors displaying endless lines of code, a drawing tablet covered in sketches of fantasy creatures, and a whiteboard scrawled with incomprehensible game logic diagrams. Her half was minimalist and tidy, with beige throw pillows and scented candles that were supposed to promote calmness. Our dates were a constant negotiation between my broke artist reality and her aspirational lifestyle. I'd suggest a cheap slice of pizza and a walk in the park. She'd sigh and talk about a new tapas restaurant her friend from the business school had recommended, a place where a single small plate cost more than my weekly food budget. I'd usually cave, putting it on a credit card, the quiet shame of the transaction a bitter aftertaste to the overpriced olives. She paid lip service to my dream at first. She'd call it my passion project. She'd look over my shoulder while I was coding and say things like, "Oh, that looks complicated," before immediately changing the subject to something more tangible, like our rising electricity bill. She was my girlfriend, but she was never my fan. She didn't see the world I was trying to build. She just saw the hours I was pouring into a digital void with no guaranteed return on investment. The little jabs started subtly. Her friend, another business major, got a fancy internship at a bank. "Can you believe how much his signing bonus was?" she'd say, her voice a mixture of awe and accusation. "He's going to buy a new car." The subtext was as subtle as a sledgehammer. "And what are you doing?" "You're drawing a pixelated goblin." She'd leave job listings for junior IT support or web content manager open on her laptop, a passive-aggressive breadcrumb trail leading towards a life of quiet, stable mediocrity. "I just saw this and thought of you," she'd say with a bright, fake smile. "It has benefits." Every time I hit a roadblock, a major bug that set me back weeks, or a piece of concept art that just wouldn't work, her support was to suggest I take a break. Not a 5-minute break, but a permanent one. "Maybe this is a sign," she'd say, her voice soft and reasonable. "Maybe you should just focus on getting a real job for a little while, save up some money, and you can always come back to your hobby later." Hobby. She called my life's work a hobby. It was a verbal paper cut, a small wound that she inflicted over and over again until my soul was bleeding out. The final confrontation, the moment that would define the next chapter of my life, happened on a rainy Tuesday night. I had just gotten a rejection letter from a small indie game fund I had applied to. It wasn't a huge blow, I was used to rejection, but it was another drop in the bucket of despair. I was sitting in the glow of my monitors, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders, when she came and stood behind me. She didn't put a hand on my shoulder. She didn't offer a word of comfort. She just sighed, a long, weary sound that contained the accumulated disappointment of our entire relationship. "I can't do this anymore. My name," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a CEO announcing layoffs. "Do what?" I asked, my voice small, already knowing the answer. "This," she said, gesturing to my computer, to my dream, to my entire identity. "This fantasy. We're not kids anymore. My friends are getting engaged, they're buying condos, they're planning for the future. And we're living in this tiny apartment, drowning in your credit card debt, while you chase a lottery ticket." "It's not a lottery ticket," I said, my voice rising in a pathetic defense. "It's a craft. It takes time." "How much time?" she shot back, her voice finally showing a spark of emotion. Pure, unadulterated frustration. "Another year. 5 years. 10. I need a partner, not a project. I need stability. I need someone who lives in the real world." I just stared at the screen, at the half-finished level of the game I had poured my heart and soul into. It looked stupid, childish, a complete waste of time. "I believe in this, Isabella," I whispered, more to myself than to her. And then she said it, the words that would be burned into my brain like a branding iron. "I know you do," she said, her voice softening into a kind of pity that was 1,000 times more painful than anger. "But I don't. You're a good guy, but you're a dreamer. And you're never going to make it. You're never going to make it." It wasn't an opinion. It was a verdict. A final judgment on my talent, my work ethic, my entire being. She had looked into the future and had seen me failing, and she was calmly, rationally stepping off the sinking ship. The rest was a blur. She packed her beige pillows and her scented candles. She left her key on the clean, empty space on the counter where her laptop used to be. There were no tears, no dramatic slamming of doors. It was just a quiet, efficient amputation. And then I was alone, truly alone, in a silent apartment, with nothing but the hum of my computer and the echoing ghost of her final words. The first month was a black hole. I didn't code. I didn't draw. I barely ate. I just marinated in my own failure. She was right. I was a fool, a cliché, the starving artist who was destined to starve. Every line of code I had ever written seemed like a testament to my own delusion. I was on the verge of giving up, of deleting everything, of applying for that junior IT support job and resigning myself to a life of fixing other people's printer problems. I was at the absolute bottom of the pit of despair, my fingers hovering over the delete project button. And then, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a noble spark of inspiration. It was a raw, ugly, primal surge of pure, unadulterated spite. Her face appeared in my mind's eye, her calm, pitying expression as she delivered my sentence. "You're never going to make it." And I thought, fuck you. Not just fuck you, but a deep, cellular, cosmic FE. You. Fuck your stability. Fuck your 5-year plan. Fuck your beige pillows. And fuck your condescending, dream-killing, soul-crushing verdict on my life. I wasn't just going to make it. I was going to make it so spectacularly, so overwhelmingly, that my success would be a monument to her catastrophic misjudgment. I would build an empire, and she wouldn't even be allowed to tour the ruins of my former life. The pain of her rejection didn't disappear. It just transmuted. It became fuel. It became a white-hot forge in the center of my chest, and I started hammering myself into a new man, a new creator, a machine built for a single purpose: to prove her wrong. The next 4 years of my life were a blur of monastic devotion to the grind. I became a hermit, a ghost who haunted a single desk chair. My social life, which was already on life support, was officially euthanized. My friends would text, "You still alive?" And I'd reply with a single yes 3 days later. Sleep became a necessary inconvenience, a biological maintenance period I resented. My diet consisted of anything I could eat with one hand while the other was on the keyboard. Instant noodles, protein bars, and a truly heroic amount of coffee. I didn't just work on the game. I consumed it. Consumed me. It wasn't a hobby anymore. It was a crusade. I realized that passion wasn't enough. Talent wasn't enough. I had to become a master of all trades. I spent hundreds of hours on YouTube tutorials and cheap online courses, learning everything. I learned 3D modeling, texturing, and rigging. I learned character animation and environmental design. I learned music composition and sound engineering, creating a haunting, atmospheric soundtrack for my world. I learned marketing, community management, and how to write a press release. My brain became a Swiss Army knife of game development skills. The game itself evolved. It became darker, more complex, more ambitious. The themes of loneliness, perseverance, and the struggle against overwhelming odds weren't just game mechanics anymore. They were my autobiography written in C++. Every frustrating bug I squashed was a victory against the voice in my head that sounded like her. Every beautiful vista I created was a defiant scream into the void of her doubt. There were moments of near-total failure. A catastrophic hard drive crash that almost cost me 6 months of work, saved only by a cloud backup I had almost forgotten about. A bout of burnout so severe that I stared at a blank wall for 3 days, unable to even think, my mind a wasteland of exhaustion. In those moments, her voice would come back, whispering, "See, I told you, just give up." And every time, I would use that voice as a stepping stool to climb 1 inch higher out of the pit. I started a small dev blog, posting occasional updates, a screenshot here, a short video clip there. First, it was just crickets. Then, a few people started to notice. A small community began to form on a Discord server I created. These were my people, passionate gamers and fellow indie devs who saw what I was trying to do. Their encouragement was like water in the desert. It was the validation I had craved from Isabella, but it was purer, more real because it was based on my work, not on me. After 4 years of relentless, agonizing, soul-expanding work, it was done. The game, my magnum opus, my beautiful, sprawling digital child, was complete. The day I submitted the final build to the online stores was the most terrifying moment of my life. I had pushed all my chips to the center of the table. This was it. The launch day arrived. I sat in my chair, the same chair I had occupied for 4 years, and watched the sales numbers tick up. 1, 5, 20. It was slow, a pathetic trickle. My heart sank. Maybe she was right after all. Maybe this was all for nothing. I felt a familiar, cold dread creeping up my spine. And then it happened. A mid-sized streamer, someone with a loyal following, picked up the game on a whim. I watched his stream, my hands shaking. He was silent for the first hour, completely absorbed. And then he started talking. He praised the art style, the music, the story. He called it a hidden gem, a masterpiece. His chat went crazy. People started buying the game. Then a bigger streamer picked it up. Then a major gaming website wrote a glowing review, calling it the first must-play indie title of the year. The trickle became a stream, the stream became a river, and the river became a tsunami. The sales numbers started to spin like a slot machine hitting the jackpot. My phone started blowing up with emails from publishers, from journalists, from other developers. My little Discord server exploded with new members. The server crashed. I had to upgrade it 3 times in 1 day. I sat there, in the same chair, in the same room, but I was in a different world. The money hitting my bank account was surreal, an abstract number that didn't feel real. But the feeling was real. It wasn't just joy. It wasn't just relief. It was a profound, earth-shattering sense of vindication. I had done it. I had made it. The first thing I did wasn't to buy a fancy car or a new watch. I paid off my credit card debt in a single glorious transaction. I sent my parents enough money to pay off their mortgage. Then I moved out of that tiny, haunted apartment. I bought a spacious, modern loft in the heart of the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that made me feel like I was on top of the world. I built a new, state-of-the-art computer not out of necessity, but because I could. I started eating at those fancy restaurants Isabella used to dream about, not to impress anyone, but because the food was damn good and I could finally afford it. I even hired a personal trainer, and the skinny, caffeine-addled coder's body began to transform into something strong and healthy. I was the CEO of my own small but wildly successful company now. I had arrived. I hadn't thought about Isabella in months. She was a ghost from a past life, a character from my origin story that no longer felt relevant. The anger and spite had cooled, leaving behind only a quiet, indifferent scar. And then, predictably, the text message came. An unknown number, but I knew who it was immediately. "Hey stranger, I saw an article about your game. It looks amazing. I'm so incredibly proud of you. I always knew you could do it. I stared at that last sentence for a full minute, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of that lie. I always knew you could do it. It was the most blatant, shameless attempt at historical revisionism I had ever witnessed. I didn't reply. A week later, another text. I know things ended badly, and I've had a lot of time to think. I was young and stupid and scared. I've regretted letting you go every single day. I ignored that one too. The desperation escalated. She sent a long, rambling email, a novel of regret and nostalgia. She told me about her life. The stable job was a soul-crushing bore. The stable boyfriend she'd gotten after me had turned out to be a cheating, emotionally vacant NPC. Her life, the one she had chosen for its pragmatism and security, was a beige prison of her own making. And she saw me, my success, my freedom, and she saw the winning lottery ticket she had casually thrown in the trash years ago. She ended the email by asking if we could get a coffee, just to catch up. Against my better judgment, a part of me, the part that wanted to see the final scene of this long, drawn-out movie, agreed. I chose the location, the rooftop bar of the most expensive hotel in the city. I wanted the setting to be a testament to the world I now inhabited, a world she had declared impossible. I arrived first, dressed in a tailored jacket and a watch that cost more than my first car. I ordered a ridiculously overpriced whiskey and watched the city lights glitter below. When she walked in, I saw her before she saw me. Time had not been her friend. The youthful spark in her eyes was gone, replaced by a dull weariness. There were faint lines of disappointment around her mouth. She was still pretty, but the effortless confidence she once had was gone, replaced by a brittle, nervous energy. Her eyes scanned the crowd, and when they landed on me, they widened in a way that was a mixture of shock, awe, and something that looked a lot like hunger. She was taking in the clothes, the watch, the confident posture, the backdrop of success. She was running the numbers, and this time the calculation was coming up very, very different. The conversation was an excruciating dance of her feigned nostalgia and my polite, gray rock indifference. She tried to reminisce about our good times, conveniently forgetting the constant tension and her crushing disapproval. She painted herself as a tragic figure who had made a terrible mistake. I was so focused on the practical things, she said, her eyes glistening with crocodile tears. I didn't realize that your dream was the most real thing we had. I was a fool. I just nodded, sipping my whiskey, offering her nothing. No absolution, no sympathy. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to an intimate, pleading whisper. Seeing you now, everything you've accomplished, it's incredible. This is the man I always knew you could be. Is it too late for us? Could we have a second chance? There it was. The moment. The final boss battle. The question I had once dreamed of. The validation I had once thought I needed to survive. The old me would have melted. But the old me was long dead. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and I felt nothing. No anger. No pity. No triumph. Just a profound, liberating emptiness. I put my glass down. The click of it on the marble table, the only sound between us. Isabella? I began, my voice calm and measured. You're misremembering things. She looked confused. You didn't always know I could be this man. In fact, you were absolutely certain that I couldn't. You told me, and I quote, "You're never going to make it." Her face went pale. The color drained from her cheeks. She had probably forgotten her exact words, but I never had. They were etched into my DNA. The thing you don't understand, I continued, leaning forward slightly, is that you were essential to my success. You were right, in a way. The man I was back then, the boy who was desperately seeking your approval, he was never going to make it. He was too weak, too unfocused, too dependent on your validation. I had to kill that version of myself to become the man sitting in front of you today. I let that sink in. I watched her process the brutal logic of it. So you see, I said, delivering the final quiet blow, you're not asking for a second chance with me. You're asking for a chance with him. I gestured around at the bar, at the view, at my clothes. But the price of admission to this life was leaving you behind. Your doubt was the rocket fuel I used to get here. So, thank you, I suppose. But no, it is and always will be too late. I stood up, leaving $100 bill on the table to cover our drinks. I didn't look at her face. I didn't need to. I have a meeting to get to, I said, a polite final lie. I wish you the stability you were looking for. And I walked away, my back straight, my steps steady, leaving her alone on that rooftop, a ghost in a life she could have been a part of but never believed in. The victory wasn't in her regret. It was in my indifference. The ultimate success wasn't the money or the fame. It was becoming a man who no longer needed to prove anything to anyone, especially her. If you've ever used doubt as fuel, smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories about building your own damn world. My boss's daughter fell for me, and not in a cute rom-com, oh gee, he's the charming young up-and-comer kind of way. I'm talking a full-blown Category 5 hurricane of entitlement, a tactical-grade obsession that threatened to vaporize my career, my relationship, and my goddamn sanity. This whole saga played out over 6 months, and let me tell you, it felt like a tour of duty in a psychological war zone where the only landmines were Chanel perfume and passive-aggressive emails. To get the full picture, you need to understand my situation at the time. I was no longer the beta simp of my past. I had leveled up. I was in my late 20s, working as a project manager at a mid-sized but rapidly growing tech firm. It was a grind, a relentless meat grinder of deadlines, client calls, and corporate politics, but I was good at it. I was focused, disciplined, and I had a reputation for being the guy who could pull a failing project out of a nosedive. I wasn't a soulless corporate drone, but I understood the game. I put in the hours, I delivered results, and I was on the fast track. More importantly, I had Sarah. Sarah wasn't just my girlfriend. She was my partner in the truest sense of the word. She was the anchor in my chaotic life. A kindergarten teacher, for God's sake. The patience of a saint, the heart of a lion, and a bullshit detector that was calibrated to military-grade precision. We'd been together for 3 years, having met after my own personal great reset. My journey out of the simp abyss. Our relationship wasn't built on drama or grand, performative gestures. It was built on a foundation of late-night talks, shared pizzas on a worn-out couch, laughing at stupid memes, and holding each other up when the world tried to knock us down. She had seen me at my most stressed, a caffeine-addled zombie staring at spreadsheets at 2 a.m., and she hadn't flinched. She'd just quietly put a cup of tea on my desk and a blanket over my shoulders. She was real in a world that felt increasingly fake. She was my endgame. The ring was already bought, sitting in a sock drawer, waiting for the right moment. My boss was a man named Mr. Thompson, a titan, an old-school, unapologetic capitalist shark in a bespoke suit. He was a force of nature, a man who could command a boardroom with a single raised eyebrow. He was tough, demanding, and had an almost supernatural ability to spot weakness. But he was fair. If you delivered, you were rewarded. If you failed, you were gone. I respected him, and I think in his own gruff, unsentimental way, he respected me. I was one of his guys. The stage was set. A good job, a great girl, a clear path forward. Life was stable, maybe for the first time ever. And then the serpent entered Eden, wearing designer shoes and armed with a freshly printed business degree from a college her dad had probably donated a library to. Her name was Madison, Mr. Thompson's one and only daughter. She was brought in as a management trainee, a corporate euphemism for, my rich daughter is bored, so I'm giving her a 6-figure salary to wander around the office and not break anything too expensive. The first day she walked in, the entire office dynamic shifted. She was beautiful, in a sharp, intimidating, high-maintenance way, like a sports car that you know costs a fortune to insure and probably handles poorly in the rain. She had an aura of effortless privilege, the kind that comes from never having to check a price tag or worry about a late fee. The other single guys in the office immediately turned into a pack of slobbering hyenas, falling over themselves to get her coffee, explain the printer to her, or laugh at her objectively unfunny jokes. It was a masterclass in simpage. I just kept my head down. Not my circus, not my monkeys. I had a project deadline to worry about. My first real interaction with her was a week later. She was assigned to shadow my department to learn the workflow. She came over to my desk, a cloud of expensive perfume heralding her approach. "So, you're the golden boy," she said, not as a question, but as a statement. She leaned against my desk, a little too close for professional comfort. "I wouldn't say that," I said, not looking up from my screen. I just get my work done. That's what Daddy says, she replied with a little smirk. He says you're a machine. All work and no play. I finally looked up at her. Play doesn't pay the bills. It does if you play your cards right, she said, her eyes doing a slow, deliberate scan of me, from my face down to my shoes. It wasn't a friendly glance. It was an appraisal, like she was assessing a piece of property. It was the first red flag, a small one, but my internal alarm bell gave a faint, premonitory ding. The shadowing became her full-time occupation. She would find any excuse to be near my desk. She'd ask me questions about the project, questions that were either so basic a 5-year-old could answer them or so complexly irrelevant that they were clearly just a pretext to engage me in conversation. I was polite, professional, and concise. I gave her the information she needed and immediately turned back to my work. I was a gray rock, an uninteresting, unresponsive surface. But she wasn't deterred. She was a hacker trying to find a vulnerability in my firewall, and my professionalism was just a challenge to her. The subtle probing began. She'd accidentally brush her hand against mine when I passed her a document. She'd linger by the coffee machine when I was there, talking about her wild weekends in the Hamptons or her recent trip to Ibiza. It was a constant, low-level broadcast of her status, her wealth, her fun lifestyle, a stark contrast to my perceived life as a boring workaholic. One afternoon, she came by my desk just as I was packing up for the day. "Leaving on time for once?" she asked, a teasing lilt in her voice. "Big plans." "Just dinner with my girlfriend," I said, deliberately and clearly. I made a point of mentioning Sarah whenever I could. It was my shield, my ward against her advances. I expected her to back off, to show some sign of respecting the boundary. Instead, her smile widened. "Oh, right, the girlfriend," she said, the words dripping with a condescending sweetness. "That's cute. What does she do again?" "Something with children." The way she said children made it sound like I was dating a woman who professionally collected infectious diseases. "She's a kindergarten teacher," I said, my voice a little colder than I intended. "She's shaping the future generation. It's important work." "Of course," Madison said, her eyes twinkling with a malice I was beginning to recognize. "It's just a man with your drive, your ambition. I'd have pictured you with someone more, I don't know, on your level." And there it was, the first direct shot, the opening salvo in her campaign to devalue my relationship, to paint Sarah as a simple, unsophisticated creature who was holding back the mighty eagle from soaring. It was textbook manipulation, and it was infuriating. "She is on my level," I said, my voice flat and final. "Have a good night, Madison." I walked away, leaving her standing there. But this only emboldened her. My rejection wasn't a deterrent. It was an aphrodisiac. She saw me not as a loyal man, but as a prize to be won, a challenge to her power of seduction. She was used to getting what she wanted, and for the first time, she had encountered something she couldn't have, which only made her want it more. The escalation became more brazen. She started manufacturing work-related emergencies that required my attention, always late in the day. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she'd say in an email at 5:30 p.m., "but I'm really struggling with these quarterly projections, and Daddy said you're the only one who really understands them." I'd reply with a polite, "Send them over and I'll look at them in the morning," only to get an instant reply, "Oh, but I really need to get them done tonight. Could you just come to my office for 5 minutes?" I knew it was a trap. 5 minutes would turn into an hour, and an hour would turn into her casually suggesting we grab a drink to de-stress. So I started CCing my direct superior on my replies. "Happy to help. I've looped in Mark so he's aware of the extra hours on this. I'll add it to my timesheet and tackle it first thing tomorrow." Suddenly, the emergencies weren't quite so urgent anymore. She tried a different tactic. She started leveraging her father's power, but subtly. She'd invite a group of us out for team-building drinks at some ridiculously exclusive rooftop bar. The invitation would be casual, but everyone knew that declining an invitation from the boss's daughter was a risky career move. I went once just to avoid seeming antisocial. The whole time, she made a point of sitting next to me, ignoring everyone else, asking me about my career goals, my 5-year plan. "You know," she said, leaning in so her hair brushed my cheek, My father really values loyalty. He promotes the people who are really dedicated to the company. The implication was clear as day. Dedication to the company meant dedication to her. I made an excuse about an early morning and left after one drink. Sarah, being the queen that she is, was completely unfazed by all this. I told her everything, from the first conversation to the latest failed seduction attempt. She would just listen, shake her head, and laugh. "She sounds exhausting," she said one night as we were making dinner, "and incredibly insecure. You know this has nothing to do with you, right? You're just a shiny toy she can't have. So she's throwing a tantrum." Her trust in me was absolute. She never once showed a flicker of jealousy or doubt. That trust was my armor. It made me invincible to Madison's pathetic mind games. The situation finally reached its climax at the annual corporate charity gala. A black tie affair. A night of forced smiles, bad speeches, and lukewarm chicken. I went with Sarah, who looked absolutely stunning in a simple, elegant blue dress. She wasn't trying to be the center of attention. She just naturally was, radiating a warmth and grace that made her stand out in a room full of sharp edges and cold ambition. Madison, of course, was there in a dress that was probably more of a statement than a piece of clothing. It was blood red, cut down to her navel, and seemed to be held together by sheer force of will. She looked like a Bond villain, and she was on the hunt. Throughout the dinner, I could feel her eyes on us. She'd glide past our table, offering a fake, saccharine smile. She made a point of talking to every important executive in the room, always positioning herself so she was in my line of sight, a constant performance of her power and connections. Later in the evening, I went to the bar to get us a couple of glasses of champagne. Sarah was busy talking to one of my colleagues' wives. As I was waiting for the bartender, a voice purred in my ear. "There you are. I've been looking for you." It was Madison. She squeezed in next to me at the crowded bar, her body pressed against mine. "Your girlfriend is lovely," she said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "So wholesome." "She is," I said, pointedly taking a step to the side to create some space. "So what's the endgame here?" "My name?" she asked, her voice dropping, getting serious. "You're a shark in a world of minnows. You know it and I know it, but you're playing it safe. You're with a safe girl in a safe life. Don't you ever want more?" "I have everything I want," I said, my patience finally wearing thin. She laughed, a low, throaty sound. "You have a mid-level management job and a girlfriend who probably wants to settle down in the suburbs and have 2.5 kids. That's not what you want. You want an empire, and I can give you that." I just stared at her, amazed at the sheer, unadulterated narcissism. "My father is stepping down in 5 years," she said, her eyes locked on mine, intense and predatory. "He needs a successor, someone smart, ambitious, and ruthless, someone he can trust, someone connected to the family. Do you understand what I'm offering you?" It was the ultimate temptation, the keys to the kingdom, the life of power and wealth she assumed every man secretly craved. She was offering me a merger, a corporate takeover of my life. I took the 2 glasses of champagne from the bartender. I held one out to her. She looked surprised, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. She thought I was accepting her offer. She reached for the glass. "I think you're confusing ambition with a lack of character, Madison," I said, my voice quiet but cutting. "I am ambitious. I do want to succeed, but I want to do it on my own terms with my own merit. And more importantly, I want to do it with a partner I love and respect, not as part of a business transaction." I pulled the glass back before she could touch it. "Sarah isn't my safe option. She's my first and only choice. She's stronger, smarter, and has more integrity in her little finger than you'll ever have in your entire body. You're not offering me an empire. You're offering me a golden cage. And I'd rather be free and happy with her than be a king in a prison of your making. So, to answer your question, no, I don't want what you're offering. Not now, not ever." Her face, for the first time, fell. The confident smirk vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, ugly shock. She had played her trump card, and I had just thrown it back in her face. Her shock quickly curdled into rage. "You're a fool," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "You're choosing a nobody over a dynasty. You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it. And then, just as I was turning to walk away, Mr. Thompson himself appeared at my elbow. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his voice a low grumble. He had seen the whole exchange. His eyes darted from my stony face to his daughter's furious one. Madison's expression changed in an instant. Her rage vanished, replaced by the teary, wounded look of a victim. "Daddy," she whimpered. He was being so inappropriate. My blood ran cold. This was it. She was going to burn me to the ground. My career, my reputation, everything. Mr. Thompson just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at me. His gaze was intense, analytical, like he was solving a complex equation. I just stood my ground, met his gaze, and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The truth was the truth. "My office, Monday morning, 9 o'clock sharp," he said to me, his voice like gravel. Then he took his daughter by the arm and steered her away, leaving me standing there with 2 glasses of champagne and the feeling that my life was officially over. That weekend was the longest of my life. I told Sarah everything. She just held my hand and said, "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." I walked into Mr. Thompson's office on Monday morning like a man walking to the gallows. I had my resignation letter typed up in my pocket. He was sitting behind his enormous mahogany desk, staring out the window at the city below. "Sit down," he said without turning around. I sat. The silence was deafening. "My daughter," he began, finally turning to face me, "is a spoiled, entitled brat who has never had to work for a single thing in her life. She has the emotional maturity of a toddler and the strategic thinking of a kamikaze pilot. She believes that the world is a vending machine, and if she pushes the right buttons, whatever she wants will fall out." I was so shocked I couldn't speak. "I have been watching you. My name," he continued, his eyes drilling into me. "Not just your work, which is excellent, but your character. I've seen how the other young men in this office have acted around my daughter, like fawning, pathetic little sycophants. And I've seen how you have acted, with professionalism, with integrity, and with loyalty to the woman you are with." He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "On Saturday night, I didn't just see my daughter throwing a tantrum because a toy was taken away from her. I saw a young man who could not be bought, a man who valued his character more than his career. In my world, that is the rarest and most valuable commodity there is." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Madison is being transferred to our London office, effective immediately. She needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet, far away from me. And the head of project development is retiring in 6 months. I want you to start training with him next week. The position is yours." I just stared at him, my brain rebooting. I had walked in expecting to be fired, and I was being handed the keys to the kingdom. But on my terms, because of my character. "Don't look so surprised," he said with the ghost of a smile. "You earned it. Now get out of my office. You have work to do." I walked out of that office in a daze. The ultimate irony. By rejecting the princess, I had won the respect of the king. That night, I took Sarah to the nicest restaurant I could think of. And in the middle of the city, under the stars, I got down on one knee and asked her to be my wife. Her yes was the only promotion I had ever really wanted. The real victory wasn't the job, or the money, or seeing Madison get exiled to a life of rainy London weather. It was proving that the foundation Sarah and I had built was strong enough to withstand anything, even a full-scale assault from a spoiled princess with an army at her back. Loyalty, bro. It's not just a virtue, it's a superpower. If you know that a real partner is worth more than any career, smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories about navigating the minefield of life and coming out on top.